My name is Fabricia Maldonado, I'm 39 years old, and in 2011 I was a deacon at the Assemblies of God Church in the Linda Vista neighborhood here in San Diego, California. I worked as a bus driver on the line that runs from the downtown station to the Chula Vista neighborhood, that route that takes all the heavy traffic from Interstate 5 every day. I had been married to Lupita for 15 years, and we had 2 children, Ismael, 12, and little Kamla, 8. Our life was simple, you know. I would get up at 5 o'clock a.m., and get home at 11 p.m., but it was a blessed life. I came to the Lord in 2003 at an outdoor service they held in Linda Vista Park, and since then, I've been a man of prayer. 8 years later, in 2011, Pastor Eliud ordained me as a deacon in the church. I took that very seriously. I visited the sick, helped with evangelistic campaigns, and was always available to serve. But I'll confess something, with all the exhaustion from driving the bus all day under the California sun, sometimes I get home and only be able to pray for about 10 minutes before falling asleep in bed. I always felt a little guilty about that, as if I wasn't giving enough to God. Lupita was a devoted wife. She worked part-time at a clothing store in the Plaza Bonita Mall and took care of the house. Ismael was going through that difficult preteen stage, a little rebellious like everyone else that age, but deep down he was a good kid. Kamla was my little princess, always by my side when I got home from work, waiting for me at the door with a smile. We lived in a simple 2-bedroom house we rented, with a small room in the back that I had turned into my prayer corner. It was there that I sought God when I had the strength. July of 2011 was a normal month. Nothing special was happening in our lives. I followed my usual routine, work, church on Sunday and Wednesday, and I tried to be a good father and husband through it all. The church was growing. We had almost 150 members at that time. Pastor Eli was a serious man. He preached the word with conviction, and I respected him immensely. I never imagined that my life would change completely in a matter of days, that God would use me in a way I never expected. Then came that Thursday, July 14th. I remember the exact date because it was the day everything changed forever. I took my usual bus route. The traffic was terrible, as always, that July heat that makes you sweat inside the bus, even with all the windows open. I got home around 11 p.m., exhausted as usual. Lupita and the kids were already asleep. I went straight to the bathroom to take a cold shower to cool down and wash away the day's weariness. After showering, I went to the kitchen to get some water. I had to get up early the next day, but I don't know, something was bothering me that night. It was a different kind of weight, you know? It wasn't just physical tiredness from work. It was as if something in the spiritual realm was heavy, pushing me, calling me. I had felt God's presence before, in moments of deep prayer, but this was different. It was a restlessness that wouldn't let me go to sleep, an urgency I couldn't ignore. I decided to go to the back room to pray a little before going to bed. I thought, I'm going to at least thank God for the day, ask for protection for my family, do a quick prayer, and that was it. I turned on the dim light of the lamp I had there. I grabbed my old Bible that was on the nightstand. I opened it to Revelation. I don't even know why I chose that particular book. I started reading quietly, trying to focus on the words, but that weight in my chest just kept increasing more and more, as if something wanted to get out of me. That's when what happened changed my life forever happened. Suddenly, I felt an intense cold that rose up my spine, starting at my lower back and going up to the back of my neck. My whole body prickled, and it was July in San Diego. It was incredibly hot. The lights in the house started flickering once, twice, 3 times in a row. My heart raced like never before. I tried to get up from the chair where I was sitting, but my legs wouldn't respond. They were paralyzed. It was as if something invisible was holding me there, keeping me in that place, unable to move. I looked around, frightened. The small room seemed the same, yet different, as if the atmosphere had completely changed. I tried to scream in Jesus' name, but my mouth wouldn't open. It was as if my voice had been stolen, as if something were blocking my throat. Fear gripped me in a way I had never felt before in my entire life. I thought of Lupita and the children sleeping in the bedrooms, completely vulnerable to whatever was happening. I thought, what's happening to me? It's a spiritual attack. I'm having a heart attack. I tried pinching my arm hard to see if I could wake up, because it seemed like a horrible nightmare, but the pain was completely real. When I managed to look up again, the little room was no longer there. I was no longer in my house with a nice view. I was in a completely different place, dark, with a horrible smell of rotten things mixed with burning sulfur smoke. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of my mouth. The air was thick, heavy, hard to breathe. That's when I heard them, moans coming from afar, muffled screams that echoed in that terrible place, and it was at that precise moment that I understood that God was about to show me something that would change my life and my ministry forever, something I could never forget for the rest of my days. My eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness, and what I saw made me tremble from head to toe. I was no longer in my little prayer room in San Diego. I was in a place that seemed to have no end, with a thick, dark fog covering everything. The floor beneath my feet was hot, almost burning them, even though I was wearing flip-flops. The smell of sulfur grew stronger and stronger, so strong that I began to feel nauseous. I tried to breathe through my mouth, but the taste was horrible, as if I were breathing in rotten smoke. The moans and screams I heard became the screams grew louder as I tried to understand where I was. They weren't just cries of physical pain, it was something worse. It was despair, it was torment, it was the feeling that this would never end. My whole body trembled uncontrollably. I thought, this is a vision, I'm dreaming. I pinched my arm again, harder this time, until it left a red mark. The pain was real. All of this was too real to be just my imagination. I started walking slowly, afraid of missteps and falling into that terrible place. With each step, I saw shadows moving in the darkness, figures that looked like people, but deformed, twisted. The heat increased the more I walked. Sweat ran down my face. My hands trembled uncontrollably. I tried to pray. I tried to call out the name of Jesus, but my voice came out low, choked, as if the very air of that place was smothering my words. I had never felt so small, so powerless in my entire life. It was when I saw her, a woman in chains, kneeling on the ground, her hands covering her face. She was crying desperately, rocking back and forth. The chains that bound her were thick, black, and seemed to burn her skin where they touched. I approached slowly, my heart pounding wildly. When I got close, she lifted her face and looked at me. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair was disheveled, her clothes torn and dirty. She looked at me with an expression of surprise and despair. You're not from here," she said in a hoarse, broken voice. "You're still alive, you still have a chance." I couldn't say anything, I just stared at her, trying to understand what was happening. She looked about 40 years old, but it was hard to tell for sure in that state. My name was Rosalva," she managed to say between sobs. "I was with the Assemblies of God in Tijuana. I attended for 30 years, brother, 30 years." Rosalva started talking faster, as if she were eager to tell me her story. "I was faithful, brother. I went to the services, sang in the choirs. I was consecrated, but I had a vice that seemed so small, so harmless." She grabbed my shirt with both hands, her dirty nails digging into the fabric. Her touch was icy despite the heat of that place. "I watched soap operas every day, like Real Love, Ruby, Passion. I didn't miss a single episode." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. "My husband, Heriberto, begged me to stop watching them. He said it was changing me, that I was different, but I insisted it was just entertainment, that there was nothing wrong with it, that I needed to relax after work." Rosalva let go of my shirt and covered her face again, crying even harder. I began to admire the actors, like Eduardo Palomo, those handsome men on television, and I started comparing them to my husband Heriberto, who worked in construction, came home dirty, tired, without all that romance from the soap operas. She continued, "In 2009, I met a man at work. I was a cleaning lady in some offices downtown. He was handsome, well-dressed, he spoke beautifully like the heartthrobs on TV, and I fell for it. I destroyed my 22-year marriage for a fantasy, for wanting to live what I saw in those soap operas. Roberto looked at me with eyes full of pain and deep regret when he found out. He cried like a little boy. He filed for a divorce. My 3 children sided with him, and rightly so. They cut me out of their lives. His voice grew weaker, as if he were losing his strength. Roberto died in 2010, of a heart attack at 47. At the funeral, my children didn't even look at me. I had chosen that man, that illusion, instead of my family. They looked me in the eyes in a way I will never forget. I died alone in 2011 in a cheap hotel room in Tijuana. Depressed, on pills, alone, and when I closed my eyes for the last time, I awoke here. I am here forever, for eternity. I was in shock, unable to process what I was hearing. I wanted to say something. I wanted to pray for her, but before I could react, I felt a different presence behind me, a presence that made my whole body freeze completely. The air became even heavier, more suffocating than before. Rosalba opened her eyes, filled with terror, looking over my shoulder and whispered, "He's coming, and that's when I heard the voice that chilled me to the bone. "Welcome, Fabrizio." The voice came from behind me, calm, almost polite, but laden with an evil that froze my blood. I turned around slowly, afraid of what I was going to find. It wasn't a giant monster with horns and a tail like they show in the movies. It was an ordinary-looking man, wearing a well-tailored gray suit, his hair combed back, his posture upright. He looked like an executive, a businessman, but when I looked into his eyes, my God, his eyes were completely black, without any white, like 2 empty holes. My whole body trembled. He smiled disturbingly, showing perfect white teeth. "You're scared, I know, but don't worry, you're not going to stay here." He started pacing around me, his hands behind his back, analyzing me. "You were brought here as an observer, Fabrizio. There's a message that needs to be delivered, and you were chosen for it." I tried to open my mouth to rebuke him in the name of Jesus, but the words wouldn't come out. My throat was closed. He chuckled softly, as if he knew exactly what I was trying to do. "Your prayers don't work here, Deacon. You're just a visitor, an observer." He stopped in front of me and came so close I could feel an icy breath coming from him. "Do you know what my greatest victory is, Fabrizio?" He pointed to Rosalva, who was still chained and trembling. "To make the believer defend sin, to make them fight for that which will destroy their home, their family, their soul." My hands trembled uncontrollably, cold sweat ran down my forehead. He continued walking around me, speaking in that calm, terrifying voice. "Do you know how many believers I've brought here? Thousands, Fabrizio, thousands of believers who thought they were just relaxing watching television after work." The demon stopped again and stared at me. He said, "Let me explain how it works. It's very simple. We actually put in a pretty, long-suffering protagonist, one that people identify with, like a married woman, unhappy in her marriage. Then she meets a man, a married man too." The demon continued explaining with a macabre smile and said, "At first the public is outraged by this illegal. They would comment on social media, 'How awful, how immoral, how can she betray her husband like that?' But with chapter after chapter showing the human side of betrayal, we showed that woman husband is boring, rude, that he doesn't pay attention to her. We showed that the lover is affectionate, attentive, and understands her." The demon laughed louder this time and said, "You know what happens, Fabrizio? In 3 weeks the same people who criticized this illicit connection would start supporting the adultery, start wanting her to stay with the lover." I stood there, horrified, listening to the demon. He moved even closer to me and said, "When people support adultery in fiction, when they normalize it on television, they have actually accepted it in real life. The human mind is so easy to manipulate, Fabrizio, so easy." He shrugged as if he were talking about something trivial. Rosalba started here watching his innocent little soap operas. After 6 months, she was already comparing her husband to the heartthrobs on TV. In a year, she was dissatisfied with her life. In 2 years, well, you know the rest of the story. I finally managed to whisper something, my voice trembling. You're the one orchestrating all this." He laughed loudly, a laugh that echoed throughout that terrible place. "No, no, Fabrizio, I'm just one of the thousands who work for him. Call me an executor, a mass communication specialist." He opened his arms. "Television, soap operas, series, movies are my favorite tools, so efficient, so discreet. People open their doors to me every night at 9 and don't even realize it. You know what's the funniest thing?" He laughed again. "Believers fight more to defend their soap operas than to defend their faith. I've already seen families split apart, people leave churches, couples fight, all because someone dared to suggest that soap operas are harmful." He pointed his finger at me. "And you're going to suggest that, Fabrizio, you're going to come back and tell what you saw here, and you know what's going to happen? They're going to call you crazy, radical, a fanatic. They're going to say you're exaggerating, that it's just entertainment." Tears started rolling down my face. It wasn't just fear, it was pain, it was anguish at understanding the magnitude of all this. "Why? Why are you telling me this?" He smiled again, that smile that sent chills down my spine. "Because I can, because even if you know, even if you tell, most people aren't going to believe. They're going to keep turning on their TVs, feeding their fantasies, opening doors for me." He said, "Fabrizio, you haven't seen anything yet. There's someone here you need to meet, someone who will affect you even more." Before I could ask who it was, I felt a hand touch my shoulder. It was a warm, comforting hand, completely unlike anything I had felt in that place. I turned and saw a being dressed in bright white, with a presence that brought a measure of peace to the torment. His eyes were kind, yet filled with sadness. Fabrizio said in a soft voice, "My name is Earl. I am a messenger of the Most High. You were brought here to testify, to understand, to warn. What you have seen so far is only the beginning of what you need to know." Earl held my shoulder firmly, and instantly I felt a peace that contrasted completely with the terror of that place. His presence was strong, protective, as if creating a bubble of safety around me. "Take a deep breath, Fabrizio," he said, looking into my eyes. "What you are about to see will be difficult to process, but it is necessary. The Lord has a purpose in bringing you here." I wiped the tears from my face and tried to calm myself, but my heart was still racing. Earl started walking and gestured for me to follow him. Rosalba remained chained behind us, crying. That image would be etched in my mind forever. As we walked, the angel began to speak. "Fabrizio, you need to understand how the kingdom of the darkness, they don't appear with horns and tridents shouting for people to do evil. They are subtle, patient, strategic." We stopped in front of something that looked like a transparent wall, like thick glass, where images began to appear. "Look," Earl pointed at the images. I could see a writer's room, ordinary people, working on computers, discussing soap opera scenes. These people don't know it, but there is a spiritual influence in all of this. Decisions about music, colors, broadcast times, everything is subtly guided by spiritual forces. He touched the glass and the image changed. Now it showed witchcraft centers, places of Santeria in Los Angeles. "Look at the schedule, Fabrizio, 9 p. the same time millions of Latinos turn on their televisions to watch soap operas." I was in shock looking at that. Earl continued, "It's not about magical frequencies or elaborate human conspiracy, it's about spiritual gateways, Fabrizio. Each once a believer sits down to consume content that normalizes sin, that glorifies rebellion, that romanticizes adultery, they are opening a door and the demons they don't waste permission." The images now showed ordinary houses, families watching television, and around them, dark shadows entering through the doors, through the windows, positioning themselves behind the people. "They don't possess immediately," Earl explained. "They influence, plant thoughts, whisper desires, feed dissatisfactions." The image focused on a woman watching a soap opera, and I could see a dark shadow whispering in her ear. On the screen, the protagonist was having an extramarital affair. That woman there, Fabrizio, has been married for 15 years. Before this soap opera, she loved her husband, But look what's happening now. The woman began to look at her husband, who was in the kitchen, differently, with contempt, comparing him. Earl changed the image again. Now it showed the same Rosalba he had just met, but living in her own home. Look at Rosalba 3 years ago, in 2008. She had just watched an episode of Passion where the main character was having a Rosalba in the image, turned off the TV and went to the room. She looked restless, touching her hair, sighing. She doesn't understand what she's feeling, Earl narrated. It's an inexplicable anguish, a desire for something different, a dissatisfaction that didn't exist before. The next day, the image advanced, showing Rosalba at work. She meets a man. He smiles at her. Normally, she would smile back politely and go on her way, but today there's an open door, a planted suggestion, a nurtured fantasy. Rosalba in the image stopped to talk to the man for a while. Earl looked at me with deep sadness. It was that week, Fabrizio, the same week that the telenovela's protagonist betrayed her husband on screen. Rosalba took the first step toward the destruction of her own family. It wasn't a coincidence. I felt my stomach churn. But she went to church. She was a Congregationalist. Earl shook his head and kept going for another year. He went to services on Sunday mornings, but every night at 9 he opened that door again, and with each chapter, the influence grew stronger. The demons she unknowingly invited were gaining ground, gaining authority over her mind, over her emotions. He touched my shoulder again. This isn't about being a believer or not, Fabrizio, it's about giving legitimacy, legality. I asked, confused. Earl nodded. The kingdom of darkness operates within spiritual laws. They can't just walk in and destroy. They need permission, breaches, open doors, and every decision we make, every content we consume, every entertainment we prioritize over the things of God, all of that opens or closes doors in the spiritual world. He pointed ahead. And now you need to see something even more shocking, something that will deeply affect you. We started walking again, and in the distance, I saw a figure in a suit kneeling in chains even thicker than Rosalba's. My whole body trembled when we got close to that chained man. His head was bowed, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat. The suit he wore was torn and dirty, but it was still clearly an expensive suit, the kind that pastors of large churches wear. The chains that bound him were even thicker than Rosalba's, black and heavy. They seemed to tighten with each step. When he raised his face and looked at me, I recognized the features of a man who had once been prosperous, confident. Now there was only despair in his eyes. "This is Octavio," Earl said. Beside me, he was a pastor of a Pentecostal church here in San Diego, in the North Park area. In 2008, he had a church of 200 members. A thriving ministry, a beautiful family. Octavio stared at me, tears streaming down his face. I tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come. How could a pastor, a spiritual leader, a man of God, be in that place? Earl continued. He preached against worldliness, against television, against soap operas. From the pulpit, he was a warrior, but at home, Octavio finally spoke, his voice hoarse and broken. I watched secretly, hidden from my wife, Dolores, hidden from my children, hidden from the church. He covered his face with his chained hands. It started with The Dead and the Destitute, that TV series with Angelica Rivera. In 2007, I'd get home late from church, everyone was already asleep, and I'd turn on the TV quietly in the living room. I told myself it was just to relax, to distress from ministry. She laughed bitterly, without joy. Distress, what a lie I was telling myself. Then came Fire in the Blood in 2008. Octavio continued. I was addicted. I couldn't miss a single episode. My wife Dolores started to find it strange that I was sleeping on the couch, that I was getting up late, and a day she caught me. It was in the early morning. She came downstairs for water and saw me watching TV. She shook her head. She cried. She asked me to stop. She said that wasn't from God. I promised her, brother, I promised her in front of her that I would stop, and I didn't. I started watching on the computer, on my phone, always hidden. Earl touched my head and suddenly I began to see Octavio's story as if it were a movie playing out before my eyes. I saw him in the pulpit preaching fervently against worldliness while the congregation said Amen. I saw him at home late at night with his laptop on his lap, watching soap operas with headphones on. I saw his wife waking up in the middle of the night and grabbing him again. The disappointment on her face. I saw the fights, the broken promises, the hypocrisy growing like a cancer. And do you know what happened, Fabrizio? Earl asked. The door he opened didn't just stay in the soap opera. The same demons Rosalva let in entered his life. He started preaching differently, softer, more modern sermons. He started saying that the church was too radical, that God understands human weaknesses, that there's no need to be so rigid. I saw Octavio gradually changing the church's doctrine, older members leaving uncomfortably, younger ones applauding the new liberal approach. Octavio continued speaking, his voice filled with regret. I hired a new secretary in Milnham's in 2009. She was young, pretty, and admired me. We started talking about the soap operas we both watched. She seemed innocent, just talking about entertainment. He paused, breathing heavily. In 6 months, we were having an affair. In a year, the whole church found out. My wife left me. She took my 2 children. I lost my ministry. I lost everything. I became a laughingstock, the subject of memes on social media. The pastor who preached against sin fell into adultery, and the worst part, he looked me straight in the eye, because I knew, Fabrizio, I knew it was wrong from day one. I knew that door I opened every night was going to destroy me, but the addiction was stronger. The momentary satisfaction was stronger, and I kept going. Octavio started crying harder. I died in 2011 in an accident on Highway 8. I was coming back from a motel with another woman. She wasn't even the secretary anymore. Head-on collision. I died instantly, and when I closed my eyes amidst that wreckage, he whispered, I thought he was going to have mercy. I thought that because I had been a pastor, because I had having preached the gospel, God was going to give me one more chance. Octavio looked at the chains on his hands. But I knew the truth. I never truly repented. I continued in conscious, willful sin until the very last day, and here I am forever. He looked at me with a desperate intensity. I warned so many people from the pulpit, Fabrizio, but I didn't listen to myself. I didn't listen to myself. I fell to my knees in that terrible place, weeping uncontrollably. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a deep pain from seeing that, from understanding the seriousness, from realizing how many people were on that path without knowing it. Earl helped me to my feet. Fabrizio, you need to be strong. There's still one more thing you need to see before you go back, a truth that will hurt, but that needs to be told. He pointed ahead. There are consequences on earth, too. There is destruction happening right now, and one of them will break your heart. Earl led me to another part of that place, walking in silence while I was still trying to process what I had seen and heard. The tears wouldn't stop flowing, my body trembled, and a deep anguish gripped my chest. We stopped in front of that transparent wall again, and the images began to change. This time it showed a church I knew, my own church in Linda Vista. My heart raced. What are you going to show me now? My voice trembled. Consequences, Fabrizio, consequences of open doors that no one sees. The image focused on specific people in the congregation. I saw Sister Selina, a 45-year-old woman, always so cheerful at services, always participating, but now in the image she was at home arguing with her husband. You're not a real man. Fernando Colunga is a man. Now that's a husband who takes care of his appearance, who is romantic. Her husband, Don Fermin, a simple man who worked as a mechanic, lowered his head in humiliation. Earl narrated as the images flashed by. Selina started watching soap operas 2 years ago. At first, it was 1, then it became 3. Now it's all of them. She wakes up thinking about the plots, spends the day commenting on social media, and at night doesn't miss a single episode. Her husband has tried to get her attention, has asked her to stop, but she fights. He says he wants to control her. The image showed Selina at recent church services, but her mind was distant, thinking about the soap operas. When the pastor preached about holiness, she was on her cell phone reading episode summaries. The image changed and showed 17-year-old Gale, the son of a traditional evangelical family. I've known Gale since he was a child. He was always a polite young man, but in the recent images, he was different. Dyed hair, ripped clothes, like the rebellious characters in soap operas, a changed way of speaking. Gale started watching teen soap operas a year and a half ago, Earl explained. He saw the rebellious, cool characters who disrespected their parents and were admired for it, and he started imitating them. I saw Gale arguing with his parents, slamming doors, sneaking out of the house. I saw him hanging out with bad company near Balboa Park, trying drugs for the first time in 3 weeks. Fabrizio, this young man is going to be arrested for drug possession. His criminal record will begin before he even turns 18, and it all started when he thought it was cool to imitate the characters that I saw on TV. My heart broke seeing that. I knew that boy. I used to play with him when I was little. The next image scared me even more. It was Sister Shimona, leader of the women's group at the church, one of the oldest in the congregation. She was at home on a Wednesday night. During the doctrine service, the TV was on Teresa, and she was watching intently, eating popcorn. Her cell phone rang. It was another sister asking if she was going to the service. Shimona lied and texted, "I have a headache today, I won't be able to go," and she kept watching. Shimona did this for 3 weeks straight. Earl said sadly, she, who was an example, who led other women, began to prioritize entertainment over the things of God. And there's more. The image showed Shimona a few months later, embroiled in a scandal at the church, details I couldn't see completely, but I sensed it had to do with gossip, division, intrigue. She's going to be removed from leadership by Pastor Eliud. The influence she allowed through those soap operas is going to bear bitter fruit. I started crying again watching all of this. Why? Why is the Lord showing me this? Earl put his hand on my shoulder, because when you come back and tell the story, many won't believe it. They'll say you're exaggerating, that it's just entertainment, but you'll have seen it with your own eyes. You'll know the truth, and some, even if they're few, will listen and be saved from this trap. He paused. But there's one story that will affect you more than all the others, a tragedy that's about to happen. The image changed and showed a young, pretty, 28-year-old woman. I knew her from church. It was Delia, a teacher at an elementary school in Chula Vista. She was alone in the room, crying while watching Mexican soap operas on her laptop. Rebelda, RBD, Class 406, one after another. Delia is in a deep depression. Fabrizio, she compares her life to the exciting lives she sees on screen. She thinks she'll never have a great love, an interesting life, a beautiful story like in soap operas. Earl showed me Delia talking to a guy online, someone she met in soap opera forums. The guy was writing strange things, mixing spiritualism with New Age philosophies. This life is only suffering. Delia, on the other side, we meet in another dimension, more evolved. We can be together there. Delia read that with tears in her eyes, believing. And then the final image, Delia writing a letter, taking pills, lying down in bed. The date on the screen was October 30, 2011, 3.5 months from now. I screamed in despair seeing that image. No, they can't let that happen. I need to warn him. I need Earl to hold my arm tightly. Fabrizio, you're going to warn, you're going to preach, you're going to alert, but not everyone will listen. Free will is sacred, and everyone makes their own decisions. I fell to my knees again, feeling faint. The image of Delia faded, but it remained seared into my mind like fire. A pretty, 28-year-old woman with her whole life ahead of her, being destroyed by a fantasy fueled by a screen. She's not possessed by demons in the way many people think, Earl explained, but she gave so much legitimacy, opened so many doors through what she consumed, that the spiritual influence of darkness managed to plant destructive thoughts, depression, hopelessness, idealization of death. All of that was building up chapter after chapter, series after series, and now she's on the brink of the abyss. He helped me get back up once again. You're going back now, Fabrizio. Your mission here is over, but remember everything you saw." Before I could answer, I felt a strong dizziness. The place started spinning around me, the images blurred together, and suddenly I was falling into total darkness. I screamed. I tried to hold on to something, but there was nothing. The sensation of falling seemed to last for hours. My stomach churned, my heart pounded wildly, and then, thud, my body hit something hard. I opened my eyes gasping, sweating profusely, looking around desperately. I was on the floor of my little prayer room. The Bible had fallen off the small table and lay open on the floor beside me. The dim light from the lamp was still on. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 4 a.m. 5 hours had passed since I started praying. 5 hours. I tried to get up, but my legs were weak. They buckled, and I fell again. I was drenched in sweat, my shirt clinging to my body, trembling from head to toe. I lay there on the floor for